I call this meeting of the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Director Kluwe, would you please read our priorities?
Is that good choreography or what? So with a flourish, our priorities. The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Number one, provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning and environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff. Our second priority is to direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and on our community.
Thank you. Director Dickman, would you read our mission and vision statements, please?
Our mission statement is to enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. Our vision statement is education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you. And Director Snyder, would you read our communications for us?
July 1st, 3 o'clock p.m., Legislative Advocacy Committee, ASC Executive Boardroom. July 2nd, 4 o'clock p.m., Policy Committee, ASC Executive Boardroom. July 7th, 5:30 p.m., Committee of the Whole, ASC Jim Hester Boardroom. July 14th, 6 o'clock p.m., regular meeting, Jim Hester Boardroom. Only one regular meeting in July. August 4th, 5:30 p.m., Committee of the Whole, ASC Executive Boardroom.
And next is open forum for community input. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at a board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak should fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to open forum. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. The Iowa Open Meetings Law prohibits action on any issue that is not on the agenda. The President will set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak during open forum. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community during open forum. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. We have two open forum requests. First is from A.J. Loss. Second is from Paul Uri. You'll have 2 minutes. Please come up to the microphone and give us your name and address.
Thank you again for the time this evening. My name is A.J. Loss. I'm not a resident of Davenport, but I am the president of Bush Construction, which is a Davenport-based construction company. I'm here again tonight to discuss...
Excuse me, I still need your address.
Sure. It's 1439 Antler Court in Bettendorf. I'm here again tonight to discuss the Davenport Central High School Pool and Auditorium project. Specifically, I want to highlight an opportunity for the Davenport School District to save $66,000 on this project. The opportunity is in your hands right now. Our proposal for CM services was $66,000 less than the next bidder. Staff has recommended spending this additional $66,000 to hire the higher bidder. Why? Because the time frame allowed for them to adequately manage the RFP process was extremely short. It was less than a week on a $25 million project. I sympathize with them for being challenged like this, but feel they were not in a position to make the correct recommendation. All I ask of you is this: direct them to reevaluate the additional qualifications information that was not requested, but that was used to evaluate the proposals. Alternatively, direct them to resolicit the CM proposals and allow them sufficient time to do their work properly. It will not take longer than 2 weeks, so you will be able to make a decision at your next board meeting. Is 2 weeks too much to ask if the possibility exists to save $66,000 on a project that's already over budget? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, AJ. Next is Paul Uri. I hope I'm pronouncing it close to right.
Hey, you've got the name right. That's perfect. Yeah, my name's Paul Uri. I live at 1921 Farnham Street in Davenport. I'm kind of concerned a little bit about this whole project we've got going on here with the pool and auditorium. I know about a year and a half ago, Robert Scott at the time was the principal of Central. We had these meetings where we involved students and coaches and administrators and also maintenance people all on the pool project to try to figure out what the best plan of action would be in building this pool. And we, with CSO Architects, we came up with this great plan. It looked great on paper. It's what everybody wanted. And the school board at that time even passed the funding for that, the projected funding for that plan at the time. And I thought that was great, all right? Everybody was involved. The parents even had like a mirror meeting at night after we had our meeting during the daytime. And it was all kind of worked out together. And then I know things didn't come in quite the way they planned with the bids coming in and everything, and it's over budget. And there's absolutely no call for the involvement of coaches and swimmers and other community members in any of these changes that are being proposed with the whole project. Today I got an email, I think it was originally to Director Snyder, and it had in there some faulty information which wasn't what, and I responded to it through Scott McKissick, and I think Mary Carruthers got a copy of the email too. Oh, and everybody got a copy of it. Well, the information in there isn't true. Warm-up, cool-down areas and pools are used at every meet except at the one meet a year, the regional meet. That's the only meet that they're not allowed to be used at. And in that letter, in my response, I kind of explained why that is, and I don't even see that being a long-term thing. I think eventually they will be. But I just hate to see changes made without community involvement, especially if faulty information is set forth. And so I would like to be included in that project and any changes that are being made for the benefit of the kids of the district. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you, AJ, and thank you, Paul, for expressing your perspectives to the board. It really is important. I have a motion for the consent agenda.
Mr. President,
Director Crumwitty.
I move the consent agenda as presented by the administration.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Sherwood.
Yeah, I would just like to point out that our named Kathy Schulte has resigned, and I just want to mention that personally, I think that's a huge loss to the district, and I hate to see her go. So.
Director Kluhl.
And a huge gain for other students in Iowa, not ours. I agree. Big loss for our district.
Any other discussion? I have to concur. I've had so many great experiences with Kathy in so many great ways with not only the teaching and her advocacy for early childhood and really the leadership that she's helped bring for early childhood to our district. So thank you very much for your work, Kathy. I'll call for the vote. Director Crumwitty.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director DeFow.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. I have a motion regarding approval of bills.
Mr. President,
Director Kluhl.
I move that the board approve the following resolution as recommended by the administration for adoption of bills. The resolution is as follows. Resolved that all claims presented to the board, having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn in the treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of June 4th, 2014 through June 18th, 2014.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Crumwitty.
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
Director Sherwood,
Yes.
Director DeFau.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Superintendent report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to point out to the board, the last few meetings I've been extremely succinct in my report, which has built me up some capital with you, so I'm going to actually show a 9-minute clip right now, and I'm showing it for 4 reasons. It was done by Tommy Garrett. He's the one that did the video for you in conjunction with Matt Pulford. It's part of our marketing department, so it's student work. It's on the website. It shows the relevance of our website and the things that you can actually see when you go on it. It points out the high quality of our STEM effort in the district and the amazing opportunities we have in our district. So this is my report for tonight and maybe a few nights in the future, so let's roll it.
People often ask me what is the most important thing about STEM, and what I try to convey is STEM is not about the attainment of content knowledge. STEM is about the application of the knowledge that students gain in science, math, engineering, and technology. It's the ability to put all 4 of those areas together. One of the important concepts of STEM is just the ability to be able to think critically, problem solve, communicate, collaborate, be innovative, be creative.
My name is Michelle Hemming, and I've been teaching here at Williams Intermediate for about 12 years. And fortunately for me, with the Davenport School District, wrote a grant, and we were awarded the grant that has turned into the Gateway to Technology program here at Williams, and this last year has just been fabulous. Gateway to Technology in the intermediate level is a precursor to the Project Lead the Way in the high school. So we complement what's going to be happening up at the high school. Our 8th grade in Gateway to Technology is our robotics program, where they will learn eventually how to do a basic program, build a robot that will actually do something.
My name is Kirsten Cayley, and I'm in 8th grade.
My name is Allison Cheatham, and I'm in 8th grade, and we have been members of the Williams STEM team for 3 years. What I liked about the Williams STEM team is just how much fun we had and all the different things we got to do, and especially like the mousetrap cars. I thought that was really fun, building and designing it and meeting new people.
What I liked about the Williams STEM team is just that atmosphere of engineering and designing mousetrap cars.
I have to say my most favorite was the mousetrap car because I loved how we got to build our own things and race them. Even though I went through a couple problems with my team, I thought it was like one of my most favorites.
The reason why I came into this club is because when I came here last year, I had a lot of fun.
When they understand how to do something, they can't wait to share it with their neighbor. And you can always tell when somebody finally learns something because they're, look what I did. And then they are explaining, especially when their neighbor's going, well, I can't get this. And then they become teachers. One of the things I'm hoping that this class can do is help them realize the overlap. It's not just technology, it's not just science, not just math. We're trying to see the overlap and how it all relates to one another in their life.
Well, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math, and we try to incorporate all the things, all those skills in the things we do.
I talk to all my kids, doesn't matter where you go. If you really like this, you need to sign up for those Project Lead the Way classes because that's what's the next step.
As an 8th grader, I have been looking forward to high school and like the different things you get to do there, like the City High program. We both chose to do the engineering and design, and so I'm really looking forward to that. And we got to tour the West High School STEM classroom, and it was really cool.
They had like little Lego robotics and different types of robots on this pen. That was kind of cool to be able to see how, they build them and stuff.
I know that for high school, if they do have the club, that it should be fun because I've got a head start here at Williams.
Well, I took CEA this year, which is a civil engineering class, which teaches you about buildings, architecture, and civil engineering. And I really liked that class. It was taught by one of my favorite teachers.
What Project Lead the Way did for me, which was really fun, was it sort of prepared me for what college was going to be like, because it's much more of an open, sort of less structured environment. So when I got to college this year and I sort of started to understand what classes were going to be like, I was like, that's really not a lot different than what we did in Project Lead the Way. Especially in the capstone class where you have almost complete creative freedom.
Last year I took Introduction to Engineering Design, and this year I'm going to take Principles of Engineering. They have a bunch of extra after-school robotics programs that are lots of fun to get into. It's a lot of fun because you get to design robots to fulfill a specific mission, and then you get to see it come to life at competitions.
Students at West High School are involved in a number of different engineering contests. We do VEX Robotics, First Tech Challenge Robotics, and Real World Design Challenge. The FTC team repeated going back to the World Championships in St. Louis, Missouri, and also qualified for the finals, which put them in the top 24 in the world.
I did take a lot of AP, more challenging math and science classes. My plans for graduation is to go to Iowa State in the fall. I'm going to major in materials engineering.
I took POE, IED, digital electronics. I plan on going to Iowa State.
For graduation, I plan on attending Iowa State University in chemistry and science. It's such a broad category. I took all the chemistry classes I could to avoid taking biology classes and found that was something that I really enjoyed.
When I was younger, I had a lot of like sports injuries myself, so I just sort of got interested in the medical field. And then once I got up to high school, I took a lot of science classes, and those sort of just helped me like, hey, I love science. Like, I think it'd be really cool to find out more about the human body. I plan on attending the University of Iowa, and I want to study medicine, so I'm going to major in biology.
It started with me wanting to be a vet, so my focus is going to be pre-vet. But as I got to high school, I took a little bit more science classes than English classes, and I realized that I did, in fact, enjoy those a lot more. And I took more advanced classes with the science. It kind of locked in that desire to go the biology route. I plan on attending Iowa State University, and I'm going to major in biology and double minor in business and chemistry. That's the plan right now.
Well, in the near future, I will be going to the University of Iowa and majoring in biology, and after that, I'll be going into medicine and trying to get my doctorate. Most of the classes that helped me toward this path was in the field of sciences. For instance, AP biology, AP chemistry, and physics. Anything that has to do with science really interests me.
Well, after graduation, I'm working this summer, and then I'm going up to Northern Michigan University to get either a major in business management or mathematics. And from there, I hope to get a master's in aerospace engineering and an MBA.
After graduation, I plan on going to Johns Hopkins University. There were a ton of classes that were so enjoyable. One of which was AP Chemistry and AP Calculus. Those were my two favorite ones, and the science field in general has just always been something that I've really enjoyed doing. So
That concludes my report for tonight. Thank you.
Nice report. Any comments by the board? Director Kluhl.
Well, we were all there when Tommy was doing that videotaping out there with Matt, and again, Tommy is just very good at what he does. I didn't see, this looked so nice. I mean, because there was a lot of hustle and bustle going on in the hallways, but he did a great job. I think it's a great video. I'm glad it's on the website.
Director Dickman.
This video is a great showcase of how our students dream big and achieve big if they follow their dreams. And so I'm really glad to see that this is on our website, helping with put a nice shine on the apple of our district.
Anybody else? Director Sherwood.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that the West Robotics team was in the top 24 in the world. I think that was, it kind of went by a little fast. I would have had a big banner there, I think. I think that's a big deal, and excellent video. And I think it reflects what we all know about the district. We've got great kids and they're doing great things.
Anybody else? All right. Well, I'd like to say thanks a lot, because that kind of stuff is just near and dear to my heart. And the schools that a lot of them are going to are great schools. I did note that it seemed like an awful lot of them are going to Iowa State University. So, all right, we'll move on with other items requiring action. May I have a motion regarding approval of contract with MJ Care, Inc.?
Mr. President.
Director Sherwood.
I move the administration's recommendation to approve the contract with MJ Care, Inc. for 2.5% of net medical revenues to provide services in the area of Medicaid billing.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Dickman.
I'm just curious if someone could. I read all the information about it. It's a little bit in legalese. Is this? Are we getting a good deal? I guess is that. Marcia, would you be the one answering that, or?
That's a really good question, and yes, we are getting a good deal. We're actually looking at possible projections of over $100,000 of savings. We've used MJ Care for the past 4 years that I've been with the district as our Medicaid billing agent, and we've actually increased our revenue significantly from the first year that I was here. And we are at a point now where we don't need to utilize the menu of options that they've offered us in the past. And so we're able to reduce our needs with them, which will incur us a significant savings. So it will be a good one.
Wonderful, thank you.
Any other questions for me?
Anybody? Director Sherwood.
What is our projected revenues? 2.5% of what?
This year, and we don't have our final numbers, so I'll work off of last year, and I can give you what we're projecting this year. We grossed about $5.5 million last year, which ended up for us right around $3.3 million, I believe, and that was with the previous percent of their fee off of our net revenue. I received a notice from the Department of Ed that we are looking at similar projections for this year. And so that fee will go down, and I think I've noted it to around $82,000 or so, from about $200,000 or more last year. So I'm just, I'm shooting in the dark with those figures, but that's kind of where we're projected at.
So that's off of the gross, not the net.
No, they get their fee off of the net. Okay. And so right now we're projected gross to come in over $5 million again. And so we kind of work within a gray area. We don't really know where we're going to end up for this year. But we are projecting with just basically we're cutting our fee in half. So we're hoping that it'll be less for us significantly. We were around $200,000, I think a little over $200,000 last year that we paid them at when everything was actually figured out at the end. And with this new fee, we're projecting it'll be half of that.
And what kind of, you say we employed them 2 years ago?
We've had them since I've been with the district.
So you could have a history of growth under them as far as revenues.
Yeah, we've increased our revenues yearly.
But by how much?
Last year we netted 3.3 million. The year prior to that, we were right around 2.7 million. Oh, I don't know if I can go back. I want to say it was about 2.2 the previous year. So each year we've increased our revenues.
But last year we paid them a little over $200,000. So that was kind of a wash as far as the increase. And that's all due to their efforts?
Oh, no. The majority of the efforts are in-house by our staff. And one of the things that we've had them do in the past, but we're getting very good at what we're doing and we no longer need them to do this piece, is all of the Medicaid documents are collected in-house by one of the secretaries within my department who does all of the legwork and ensuring everybody's getting all of their paperwork in and submitted in a timely fashion and so forth. She's always gone through all of that paperwork, ensured that it's all correct. Then we send it to them. They kind of replicate that same process, and then they send it on to the state, ensuring that we have everything correct. The step that we'll be doing now, that we believe we've gotten good enough at that we no longer need them to do it, is we'll be actually tallying all of the information up that we've had them do in the past, and then we'll still submit it to them so that they can review it to ensure that we've done everything correctly, and we'll send it off to the state. But the big time cruncher, which was what was taking the majority of the time, is actually going through and calculating all of the time on the sheets, because we generate a lot of Medicaid billable documents on a daily basis. We'll now be doing all of that in-house because we're good at doing it and we don't need for them to do that piece any longer.
Yeah, I guess my take would be that you can hire skills, and that if they're not showing us that they're carrying their weight, which it looks like more and more they probably are not. We're probably subsidizing what they're doing as opposed to new revenue that they're generating. Then why wouldn't we take it in-house completely and eliminate these guys?
Well, one of the reasons why we haven't eliminated them completely is because periodically we could end up being audited. And so if we do end up in a situation where the state of Iowa will get audited by Medicaid or Medicare, and if our documents get pulled and we have to go through an audit process, it's always nice, and we actually wrote it into our policy that I brought to you folks this past school year, that we need to have an outside agency ensuring that we're not being fraudulent in our Medicaid billing. So they will operate in that capacity as well, ensuring oversight for us to ensure that we're doing everything correct. So we would not be comfortable eliminating them from the picture completely.
And that service is part of the contract?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other discussion? I had a couple questions. If we've been working with MJ Care for some time, have you ever looked at other providers of this kind of service?
Well, since I've been with the district, MJ Care has been in place, and we've been very pleased with the services that they've provided. There are other agencies within the state. One agency that yearly they've contacted us, but their fees, their program is not really has not been at a level that we would say we need to stop what we're doing with MJ Care and look at other providers.
Okay.
We've been very pleased.
And the contract, which is labeled agreement, is that their document, or is it ours, or is it theirs that's been modified? How would you represent that contract?
We did have a different contract with them previously, and this is now a modified contract that they have provided to us, representing the differences from what we were utilizing with them in the past to what we're utilizing with them now. So they've provided us with that agreement, if that answers your question.
Well, I think so, but it includes then your recommendations of changes, things like that?
Yeah, we had a very lengthy meeting with the representatives from MJ Care in which we sat down as a group and we talked about these are what the services that we need. These are the services we no longer need from you, and felt very affirmed in our decision when they indicated that a number of school districts had moved in the direction that we're now moving in.
All right, thank you very much. Any other discussion? Not, we'll call for the vote. Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director DeFow.
Yes.
Director Crumwoody.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of annual membership dues for UEN?
Mr. President,
Director Kluhl.
I move that the board approve the annual membership dues to the UEN in the amount of $8,500.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Kluhl.
Perhaps not that there needs to be any, but I just feel like the UEN has been aligned with what we're trying to do here as a district, looking at their top three legislative priorities, funding the 6% allowable growth, student mental health, and assessment aligning with the Common Core, and also the last statement saying that while we support the value of norm-referenced assessments, they should not be used for accountability purposes, which are three big issues for this district. So, and I think that they have done well in terms of trying to get those priorities out across the districts and get them also to Capitol Hill. So I'm on the steering committee of the Urban Education Network. I think that we kept the dues the same this year as last year. I think it's a good bang for the buck.
Any other discussion? Director
Mr. President.
Crumwoody.
I am supportive of continuing our membership with UEN. However, as Director Kluhl has just mentioned with legislative advocacy, UEN does not have a full-time lobbyist to support us. So that's an issue that I think should be dealt with at UEN to give us more support in that area. And when we talk about the next issue that's going to be on the table, the Iowa School Board Association, I want to talk a little bit more about that.
Any additional discussion? All right. Well, I'll call for the vote. Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director DeFow.
Yes.
Director Crumwoody.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of annual membership dues for IASB?
Mr. President,
Director Crumwoody.
I move the recommendation that the board approve the annual membership dues to the IASB in the amount of $11,068.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Director Crumwoody.
I want to say a few things about the Iowa School Board Association. I just spent last week in Des Moines with the Legislative Resolutions Committee, and I have a very good feeling about our relationship now with the Iowa School Board Association and the direction that the Iowa School Board Association is headed. I think most of us know that Tom Downs is stepping down, and Lisa Bartusek, who many of us know, is taking over, and she has been at the national level and now is going to be the leader at our state level for the Iowa School Board Association. Lisa was instrumental in developing the Iowa School Board Association Leadership Academy that several of the board members went through a few years ago. And the message is that that probably is going to be reestablished if we can figure out how to do it more regionally than what's been done in the past. With the Legislative Resolutions Committee, we now I happen to be that member on the committee, and as a member of an urban network, I am asked my opinion quite a bit. And just one issue I want to bring up, I have on this board mentioned many, many times about equity and preschool in our district. And one of the things that has concerned me is that our preschools are not accessible to all children in this district because of transportation costs. And so for the first time, this is probably going to be one of the resolutions that is going to be brought forward. The Iowa School Board Association does have a full-time lobbyist, which is a real plus. And the whole process is going to change, and Director Sherwood was with me last year, and I talked a little bit about this last week, that we have not had much discussion about the resolutions that are presented. They come to us, and I know that here I am sitting and representing the district and voting, and Director Sherwood said, you know, we really didn't even talk about this. I probably wouldn't have voted that way. So we're going to now, for the first time statewide, ask that every school board in Iowa put on their agenda before the 1st of August that we have discussions about the resolutions that are going to come back to the board, and to also to present our resolutions. And I know we've talked about some other resolutions at the local level. So I think that's a real plus for us to continue our work at that level. I think it's a plus for our legislative advocacy at the district level and for our committee. I also, Director Kluhl has put together for us a presentation that we're going to be making at the convention in November, which, is that correct?
I actually have not put it together. It will be a joint effort.
Okay, well.
You might mention who will be doing that presentation.
Director Kluhl, myself, President Johansson, and Bill Decker from the AEA. Anyway, those are some of the reasons that I think that we need to continue our relationship and continue with being members of the Iowa School Board Association. We weren't active a couple of years ago, and now we've rejoined, and I just see a changed organization, and I'm really excited about Lisa Bartusek taking over at the head of the association. And just one last comment, it's not just joining, it's being involved. And when I was up at the office the other day, there was like 7 different districts that came up, and they were having sessions with different folks up there about school board policy or whatever. So I think that if we are members of the Iowa School Board Association, we need to use the Iowa School Board Association, either them coming to us or we going to them to support whatever our needs are, whatever our issues are. And I don't think we use them enough. So anyway, I support this.
Is there any additional discussion? Director Dickman.
The rejoining of the IASB was one of the first controversial things that came up right after myself and Director Snyder joined the board. And I remember being very on the fence about which way I was going to vote up until I had actually voted. And I still feel kind of like that. I think that the UEN does align with our priorities a little more. The IASB, they have a lot of our same priorities, but they're kind of going in a different direction on, or maybe putting more emphasis on things that we're not quite as concerned about, that we don't feel are quite as pressing. And it really comes down to, does the extra weight of influence that we gain by being members, is that worth our $11,000? And I don't know.
Director Snyder.
I'm pretty much on the same page as Director Dickman. I know when we first discussed it, I was kind of excited about the opportunity. And then when I heard the speech the night we voted, it was concerning to me that it was presented to us that they needed us more than we needed them. And that's why I voted no then for it. But I since have seen some of the things that the IASB offers. We went to some pretty valuable training in regards to school finance, in regards to how boards for schools work, as well as their convention. But I still am not real sure, because I don't have the experience under my belt to know really the difference. Have we seen $11,000 worth of benefits this year from it? So that, I guess I'm asking to the board, who's seen both sides of it, years where we've had it, years where we haven't. And if we do continue this as a board, as Director Crumweedy stated, I think we do need to use them more to get some of our the benefits that they do have to offer, because they do have a number of benefits that they've laid out to us, and I don't think we're utilizing them to our potential.
Any additional discussion, Director Kluhl?
Well, I'm real pleased to hear our new board members say that they don't have a position on this yet, that they're waiting to hear. That, to me, speaks well of this board. As one of the, and so what I want to do is follow up with what Director Crumweedy did in terms of history of the board. I've had some history, and I want to share that a little bit with you, and then listen to the rest of the board talk about yeses and nos as to why we might or might not join. I was on the Iowa Association of School Boards board for a year and a half before I had another commitment that I had to drop out. And I happened to join the year that everything went haywire. Our chief executive officer and financial officer were both brought before the Iowa Ethics Board and were relieved of duty very quickly. And it was nothing about what I wanted to do, because it was all legal issues and dealing with issues in front of the Ethics Board, when I wanted to work with what we're doing here, working with the interest of kids and student achievement. We went through that. The board at that time said, we're not going to be part of this, basically because I think they needed us more than we needed them at that point. So we dropped out for a couple of years, and then just most recently decided to rejoin. And I think that Director Crumweedy hit it to the point. He said that we need to use it. For the longest time, when I was a board member, and before that, we didn't really utilize the Iowa Association of School Boards for anything, I think, except for their policy, online policy guidance, and I don't know if we still use that or not.
We search their resources to look for, policies that we can use to frame our own.
Mm-hmm. But for the most part, other than that, we haven't made a great deal of use of them. So it will be worth the effort that we put into it to utilize them. And I'm real glad that Ken is now on the Legislative Resolutions Committee. He's active in that, and I think we have a good opportunity to input through LRC. I have not seen the value of IASB. Have I seen, it's like, have you seen $11,000 worth of work? Well, it's kind of like, as a wildlife biologist, one of the things that we did is we tried to assess what is the importance of wildlife. Well, it's pretty open-ended, but you can categorize it. You can economically look at it and say that, well, you have hunting permits, you have recreation, you have hotels, you can monetize it. Frankly, given the personnel at UEN, all my needs have been met. in terms of legislative advocacy. I don't think there's any finer person who can analyze legislative information than Margaret Buckton with the Urban Education Network. Mary Gannon is very good, but I've become accustomed to using UEN for those services and am totally satisfied. So at this point, I just wanted to give a little bit of history of where I'm at. I am not decided at this point. We need to save a lot of money. Over the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to be cutting $4 million a year. This is a small drop in the pan of what we need to save, but it is a savings. On the other hand, as Director Cumwoody talked about, there's something bigger than the things that we get from IASB. We also get from them an opportunity to be in the larger choir, to speak for our kids in Iowa, and specifically our kids here in Davenport. Again, I'm not real impressed with what we've had over the past year, but I do think that with the new executive director coming in, Lisa, I expect some great things because she's great people. She was great in the past at IASB, and I know that she'll do the same again, including, I'm hoping, starting the IASB Academy, again, the Leadership Academy. So with that, I'd like to listen to other board members speak.
Any additional discussion? Director DeFau.
And I appreciate Director Crumwoody's enthusiasm for the Legislative Resources or Resolutions Committee and that process and the ability to help direct that process. But my question is, if lobbying is a strong suit of IASB, in the last legislative session, what, if any, legislative resolutions did they successfully lobby for and that were passed by the state legislature?
I don't have the list in front of me, but there were some that we just talked about last week. I should have brought that along with you.
I'd be really interested in that because I know that we've had limited success in the legislative arena. We can't even get the state legislature to set an allowable growth rate, which has not even been mentioned this year, which is criminal because there's no reliable funding that we can anticipate for schools in the next year. I'm not convinced that this is a membership that we need to retain. But yet, knowing where you're at, your position there, and believing in your commitment gives me a little glimmer of hope. A little.
Anything else? Director Sherwood.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this is the hottest organization we can belong to, but there was a conversation statewide. There were a number of editorials on setting allowable growth and how the legislature was violating its own rules, and so some of those were generated, I think, because of pressure from organizations like this. Some of it because we went to meetings with legislatures and yelled at them, but some of that did happen statewide. I don't think that with new leadership coming in, I don't think now's the time to jump ship on this because we need organizations that are effective. And if this is not as effective as we would like, then we would charge our representative for building a fire under some people and try and do that ourselves. But what other game do you have? You got UEN, which has already been stated, doesn't have a full-time lobbyist, and although I think potentially is as effective as Iowa Association of School Board, it's not there either. So we don't have a powerhouse organization in the state, and if we want one, we can't abandon the possibilities of these things. Like we need to help build them. And if Ken's an enthusiastic architect, then let him go to work.
Any additional discussion? I've got a few things to say. I guess I'm about in the same spot. I'm lukewarm on this. some of the comments that Director Crumwitty talked about, I was curious about the reference to equity, and I didn't know if that was the equity with respect to per pupil funding across the state, or what that was referencing.
No, it had to do with not all preschool students in this community have access because of costs of transportation.
Okay, thank you. That's sufficient. I appreciate that. I think that we have discussed equity for a number of years, and we have tried to get the IASB to get on board and to at least try to support it as a board, if not as an organization. I understand the difficulties in trying to get the organization to support it, but I would sure hope that the board would support it. And I think at one point, Tom did say that the executive leadership was supportive of it, but I don't know if it ever got to the point where the board actually supported it. To me, that's a big issue. It's a couple $1 million a year to our district alone, if we could get that. And I wish that there were a way to influence the board, and maybe part of it is through the LRC. I'm not sure. My impression is that the IASB is still pretty much a small district-driven organization. We've tried to get additional positions on the board, and I don't know, Director Crumwitty, can you talk on that? Do UEN or larger districts have any specific set-asides in the board membership?
I'm not sure about the board membership, but on the LRC, yes. Also, it's not just small districts. They have now have a seat for the area education agencies. They also have a seat for the community colleges. And part of the discussion that we had the other day is that we need to work together as a unit. For the AEAs also, I don't know if everyone realizes this, but they've been losing $15 million every year. And that's got to stop, because it's going to come back on our district. We depend on the area education agencies big time for especially special education services in this district. So on LRC, yes. On the board, I don't know. I don't know the board members.
Okay, thank you. Relative to the value, as I looked at the information that we had in our packets, I questioned the value as I was preparing for this meeting. Is there any additional discussion? Director Snyder.
Does the decision on this have to be made tonight?
No.
May I make a motion then?
Depends what kind of motion you're talking about.
Again, I don't know the exact lingo, if it is postpone or delay this decision until our next meeting so that we can get some of these questions answered, as Ms. Defoe had stated, on what things actually made it through. It would be postponed, according to Mary. Thank you, Mary. So we can get some of this information that we've discussed tonight to make a more educated decision.
All right. Yeah, and I don't have my little cheat sheet. So it's been moved to amend, or I'm sorry, moved to postpone to a certain time, right? Not indefinitely.
No, just to the next meeting.
Okay. The vote on this issue, is there a second for the amendment? Excuse me.
A specific date has to be given.
Which is
Yeah, I think
14th?
that works.
I think it was July 14th.
Okay. All right, to July 14th. Is there a second to the motion to amend? Or postpone, excuse me.
Second.
It's been seconded. Is there any additional discussion on this motion to postpone? Director DeFau.
I know that the superintendent provided for us a memo which indicated that with very few exceptions, our administrators have not been utilizing the IASB resources. But what I would like to know in preparation for the next meeting and vote is what resources are available to us that we are not utilizing. Yeah, again, so what would be the value added if we retain this membership? Maybe there isn't, but I'd like to know that, and I'd also like to know the success of the lobbyists in terms of what legislative resolutions have in fact been adopted by the legislature.
Okay. Any additional discussion on this motion to postpone? I'm going to say something because I had actually planned on offering an amendment. And so depending on where this motion to postpone goes, I just want the board to be aware of the way I was thinking. One of the thoughts that I had is to go ahead and pay 50% of the $11,068 as a kind of lukewarm support of the IASB membership, and that might make a little bit of a statement. I'm sure we'd maintain our good stead, even though we tried to talk with the CFO a couple years ago along those lines, and he said he wanted the full amount. Any additional discussion on the motion to postpone? If not, we'll call for the vote. And I apologize. I didn't keep track in this case of the seconder. Thank you. The motion to postpone, Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director DeFau?
Yes.
Director Dickman?
Yes.
Director Sherwood?
Yes.
Director Crumwitty?
Yes.
Director Kluhl?
Yes.
My vote is no. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of CSO architects?
Mr. President,
Director Dickman.
I move the administration's recommendation to continue the relationship with CSO Architects of Indianapolis, Indiana, for the design of the Central High School pool and auditorium as originally approved by the board on March 25th, 2013.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Dickman.
In doing all the research that I could on this, the scale of the project has obviously exceeded its original plans. And I guess I'm concerned that we're fulfilling everything that's on the wish list. And it's great that we have community advocates. We had some people speaking earlier. And that you're advocating for the things that you feel you need and some of the things you want. But with 30 buildings to take care of, we can't necessarily fulfill all of the wants, and maybe some of the needs have to get a little reduced, or whatever language you want to use. So I'm concerned that the project has kind of taken on a mind of its own and grown to a point where we're just fulfilling more wants than needs.
Thank you. And Director DeFau.
And while I appreciate Director Dickman's comments, in my mind tonight, this is not a vote about the scope of the project. This is a vote about whether or not we retain CSO. And I think that if we make it about the scope of the project, though I would concur with Director Dickman's conclusions, I think that it might compromise our conversation about whether or not we should retain the architect.
Thank you for those comments. That's it is part of this discussion, and I'll try to be observant of our discussion, because it is true that we want to somewhat narrowly consider the issue and make sure that we are trying to get to an approval or disapproval of the architects. At the same time, I anticipate that there are a lot of questions and concerns, and so I'll try to be judicious in my management of the meeting relative to that. Is there additional discussion? Director Sherwood.
Yeah, just a couple of questions that came up when I was reading over this stuff. We're into these to about $1.5 million, something like that already. I don't have the exact figures here.
Just a bit more than 1.6.
1.6. And according to your information, CSO retains ownership of the product of what we've already paid for?
The ownership, yes, the work products of the architect are belong to the architect.
And this
is standard in the standard AIA architect contract. That's an ordinary provision.
It's an interesting concept. We pay to have something done, but they retain what we pay for. It's a very interesting concept. I find that it really limits our choices because of that feature of this thing. If the product of what we've already paid for was ours, which I think it should be, but in this case contractually it's not, then it might alter our choices quite a lot. Thank you.
Any additional discussion? Director Crumwoody.
So if we don't retain CSO, I guess I'd like to hear what our alternatives are.
And I'd like to take a shot at answering that in anticipation of this discussion tonight. And everybody has a copy of the contract. Is that correct? And on page 13, section 6.6 says if the owner's budget for the cost of work at the conclusion of the construction documents phase services is exceeded by the lowest bona fide bid or negotiated proposal, the owner shall 1, give written approval of an increase in the budget for the cost of work. 2, authorize rebidding or renegotiating of the project within a reasonable time. 3, terminate in accordance with section 9.5. 4, in consultation with the architect, revise the project program, scope or quality is required to reduce the cost of work. Or 5, implement any other mutually acceptable alternative. I did talk with our lawyers on this. What can we do? Where can we go? And the board has incredible latitude in where it can go if it makes a decision to discontinue the relationship with CSO. It could go back, and I apologize, I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but all of us have had it, that described the process that our administration went through. And basically, the administration sent out a bunch of RFPs. They received a bunch of proposals, and there was a committee that was set up. The committee established that there were 4 that were going to be evaluated. Those 4 were evaluated, and they had presentations that were made. And then at that point, the committee made a recommendation for CSO. CSO and, the administration then brought forth CSO for approval by the board. The board approved CSO as the architect. Things moved forward. CSO did some of the community input meetings, and they moved forward with the process until recently when they received the bids that were in excess of the original. If you look on the excuse me, on page 2, down toward the bottom of section 1.1, it says the total cost for the project shall not exceed $25,364,298. So CSO came forth with bids that were in excess of that, and that's kind of where we are today. With respect to where the board can go, the board could make just about any decision that it wants. We are not held by any laws that I know of. We could go all the way back to an RFP process. We could go somewhere between where we are now and the RFP process. But there's no particular requirement legally to go to any particular point. And Mike, would you agree with that representation?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, thanks. Does that answer the question? I don't even remember who asked it now.
I did.
Director Crumwoody, does that answer your question? Okay, is there any additional discussion? Director Sherwood.
That entire 1.6 million is not invested just in the product that they have contractual claim to. That there's also soil testing and all that stuff's in there. Is that correct?
No, things like the geotechnical testing are an owner's costs that are not included in that.
Not included in 1.6. Okay, thank you.
Director Dickman.
It is my understanding that this project has kind of already been pushed back a considerable amount of time, and the pool is becoming close to unusable. Is that correct?
Perhaps Mr. Scott can better speak to that.
I'm sorry, I was asking him a separate question.
It's my understanding that the current pool that the students are using is becoming close to unusable.
I believe it's what I have been told over the years of the maintenance of that is becoming more and more expensive.
Okay.
That is correct, and the new, much larger pool would be more efficient than even what we're currently using, only for 4 lanes.
Okay. Yeah. The one of my concerns is the long-term maintenance cost. When it's brand new, it will probably be lower, but as it ages, it will probably also increase. The only options that I see as favorable are to either authorize the rebidding, negotiating of the project within a reasonable amount of time, or in consultation with the architect, revise the project program scope or quality as required to reduce the cost of the work. If we did authorize a rebid and CSO rebid, would the 1.6 million be out the door already?
Well, that's what we've paid for services rendered so far, and if we continued to engage CSO, they would redraw and do additional work, and we would rebid, and that would be included in the original contract price. There would not be additional fee. It would be beyond the 1.6. The original contract was 1.927.
So I'm going to ask a few questions. I don't normally do this, but I want to ask about the contract where several places, like 3.2.2, 3.3.2, and others, but I'll use 3.3.2 because it's easy to see. And it says the architect shall update the estimate of the cost of the work. So I'm curious because this situation that we were put into a month ago or whenever this happened, where all of a sudden we're way over what's right on this contract. And this contract says 25,364,298. And so there was discussion about, well, here's why. There were some mistakes made. There were too few bidders, all of these things. But when I read through the contract, I go, well, why didn't we know about this a little bit sooner? If this cost of the work discussion, or when the architect shall update the estimate of the cost of the work, can you tell me that those updates were done? And if they were done, why did this occur so suddenly?
Well, Ms. Tangent provided you a kind of history of the budget estimates that you had in your packet there, and there were a number of revisions upward over the life of the project. And I cannot tell you that there was a monthly update or some periodic adjustment other than that record that you have seen. And at your meeting last month, you heard an explanation from the architect of why the estimated cost of the work was 25 million, et cetera, as in the contract, and the low bid was 28 million. So there was no update between the time that the 25 was established and the 28 was in hand.
But I'm saying that my read of this contract is that that's required. The document that we got talked about the changes from 21 million to 23 million to 25,364, and the 25,364 was on the document that I signed. Yep, I did. And if I read this contract right, there are requirements for cost of work updates after this is signed, and I read it before all these bids occur. And that's what I'm curious about, is there had to be, they didn't spend $1.6 million when we were at 21 million or at 23 million. They spent it after this was signed, which was, I don't see the date on it now, but they spent that money, and that cost of work update occurs several times in this document. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about prior to that. So were there cost of work updates?
I do not know the answer to that.
I'm wondering if cost of the work estimate means after you have had your bids, after you've improved the project, and then there are things which are added to it. Because to me, I'm not sure what happens between the time that you employ an architect and then the bids are in. And that's when we first saw the horrendous increase. So again, I'm no expert on this, but I've been involved in things where people come in and say, we had estimated it's going to be 28 million and now it's more, and here's the reason.
My review of the documents, I was able to find that there was an independent architectural cost consultant employed, that estimate was concurred with the $25 million estimate, and I find no periodic record during the course of that approximately 1 year from the time the contract was signed of an update monthly or quarterly. I don't find such a record, and I'm sorry I wasn't here to be aware of what conversations may have taken place. I can't speak to that.
I understand, but and again, it's my reading of this, but when it talks about the design development phase services, and here it says, based on the owner's approval of the schematic design documents and on the owner's authorization, blah, 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 and including the budget for the cost of work, the architect shall prepare design development documents for the owner's approval, et cetera, and that's in 3.3.1. And then in 3.3.2 is where it says the architect shall update the estimate of the cost of work. And that's way before the bid occurs. So I'm just saying that it looks like, from my perspective, that the contract was not agreed to or not adhered to, probably by several people. I want to tell everybody that I did receive a call from Scott Martin on this also. And he described the process of evaluation of the architects by the committee, and he said that the representation that was in the documents that we had was correct, and the committee made a firm and good decision with respect to CSO. He also accepted responsibility for any of these, even though I didn't have a chance to talk with him directly about my concerns. He must have gotten them somewhere, because he said that any of these things, updates, etc., would have been his responsibility. So I'll come back. I've got some more things, but I just wanted to express those, my real concerns about that cost of work and the updates that apparently we didn't have. Oh, one other thing, in talking about cost. We had the update from Marcia with how we got from 21 million to 23 million to 25.6 to 30 million. And you and I had some conversations. I was trying to understand all of this. And can you say, at the 25 point, in this document here, where we agreed to 25.364 million, was the architect fee of approximately 1.9 million part of this?
Ordinarily, no. The owner's budget is for the cost of the work.
The owner's budget is for the cost of the work, and the architectural fee would be separate.
Right, and other owner expenses that are detailed, as we mentioned, the geotech report, things of that are also separate.
Separate, and then what about contingencies?
And any contingency would be something that the owner budgets separate from the cost of the work.
So how is all that budgeted if does that come out of all of our lost money, all of those the architect's fees for, say, 2 million, the contingencies, which may be a few million, I have no idea what's normally set for contingencies, but you might have $5 or $6 million of additional fees beyond this 25,364 that the board doesn't even know about. Is that correct?
Ordinarily, we would expect somewhere between 20 to as much as 30% of the cost of the work for soft costs, for other things.
And do all those costs come out of the same lost funds?
All of those would be out of the same budget.
And so that would decrease the amount of money that is left in that fund for all of the other projects?
Yes, the total project cost has to include the cost of the work, all of the other owner's expenses, and the cost of the design, the cost of contingency, and the cost of any furniture, fixtures, equipment that are not attached to the building.
So can you make a judgment? I mean, this 25,364 with contingencies and with architect fees, what would you guess a budgeted amount might be for the total project?
That it would approach 30 million.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion? Director Sherwood.
Yeah, would you share with us what your thinking is about the point on the updates of cost? Are you thinking there's a breach here, that we might be able to recover some of this? What you're thinking?
No, I talked with Dick Davidson, who he reviews our contracts. I actually did ask him to consider rewriting portions of the contract or writers to the contract that would prevent some of the things that Director Sherwood, you were asking about earlier, but that's down the road. Our contract is our contract. I'm not suggesting that there's probably going to be any recovery. In fact, in talking with Dick Davidson, he suggested there may even be additional costs if the decision were made to stop the agreement with CSO. They may have additional closeout claims. But with respect to breaches, no. Where I'm going is that I think the board and the district are in a ridiculous position right now, because if the board says no, then that $1.6 million is in the toilet, right?
It is spent.
It's spent, and we have nothing to show for it. But if we continue to move forward, we're going to spend somewhere around $30 million total on what we thought was $25 million. So, so either way, it's going to be a tough position for the board to take.
I
Dr.
guess
Sherwood.
my take is that I can't necessarily fault CSO for the lack of knowledge of us, those what you call soft cost or whatever you call them. I think that was an administrative responsibility to inform us of those costs. And I do remember a conversation about furniture and unattached things, but I don't recall these other aspects of these soft costs ever being discussed at this board. And if I'm mistaken, I'd like to be corrected.
Sure. Thank you. Director Snyder.
I guess I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. A lot of these decisions were made before Director Dickman and I came on, but it's sounding to me like a project that was originally budgeted at about $20 million would now be costing us, with the bids that we have and these extra fees that we're just now learning about, would not be about 30 million, but would indeed be about 35 million?
I don't believe so. I believe the way that Mr. Maloney's suggested that it would be a total of about 30, right? Not 35.
If we accepted the current construction bid and went through with precisely where we are, it would be around 30.
Okay.
Director DeFau.
And I agree that this is a ridiculous position to be in. The thing that concerns me most, though, because we can make the decision tonight to keep you retained and move forward with you to look for ways to save cost without impacting quality, which I am certain we can do. But you gave us a list of cost containment measures at our committee of the whole meeting that was misrepresentative, because in the list of potential cost savings there were line items that could not be taken simultaneously. It was A or B, not A and B, and yet it was added up as a potential total cost savings. You also suggested that we simply switch buckets, that rather than take out of local option sales tax funds, that we take out of our physical plant and equipment levy. That is not a cost savings, that is a shift of cost. That doesn't give me a good faith in moving forward. It makes me question whether or not the best interests of the district from this point moving forward are really going to be looked after.
Excuse me. I wanted to clarify that I want to make sure you're aware this is Mr. Maloney, our...
oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I just some of the words...
I know.
I know
you're
that they
right.
were
That
both
did sound
there, but...
misrepresentative, but I think you were involved in that, at least had knowledge of that list. So it just makes me question whether or not we should retain. So I apologize. Carried away in a moment.
Thank you. Director Dickman.
The original budget was 20 million, and even if it is only 30 million, that's still 10 million more dollars than we had initially anticipated spending. And for $10 million, I'm guessing that we could probably do a lot of things. I realize that the costs for the pool are not coming out of the general fund, but there's the public perception that we're spending all this money on a state-of-the-art pool, and we're cutting literacy and math coaches. Also, what we could be doing with those funds, we could Mr. Scott mentioned briefly that the new pool would be more efficient, and so there would be less maintenance costs. Is that correct? Okay. But we could also, if we scaled down the pool, then there would be further a reduction in maintenance costs, as well as we could redirect some of that money to sustainability and things like solar panels and insulation, so that we're further reducing our general fund burden. I feel hesitant to leave $1.6 million sitting on the table and walk away from it. But I'm concerned that we're going to rack up $30 million worth of costs all the same, even as if we continue with CSO.
Director Sherwood.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far down this road, but as far as the scope of this thing, we knowingly and willingly increased this to the $25.3 million number because we wanted to provide for the kids at Central and for the district a state-of-the-art facility. And my thinking on that hasn't changed a lick. And with the communication by the swim coach about warm-up areas and other buildings and so forth around the MAC and probably around the country, my thinking hasn't changed on this at all. So even though this situation stinks, we can't lose sight of the two things that I think are critical: the quality of the facility for the kids at Central High School, and the need for the district to offer very competitive facilities for other districts around us, where we still have the issue of open enrollment, and this is one way of beginning to stem that issue. So I don't want to get too far down here, but I'm not willing to address the scale. As far as the design concepts and being able to reduce funds with different materials, different aspects of redesign, then that's a different ballgame. But scope, I'm not willing to address right now.
Director Dickman.
As to the issue of open enrollment, I think that spending money to make a state-of-the-art athletic facility to attract a small population of high school students who are being sought after actively, potentially by other districts, is not in the best interest of the district. I think having top-notch elementary, middle schools, and high schools that are addressing our students' academic needs primarily, first and foremost, is the best way to stem the losses of open enrollment. I think that you're more likely to see a great loss of students when parents see their children coming home not learning what they need to learn and not getting the help they need to get, instead of a small number of students possibly going to another district because they don't have a state-of-the-art pool.
Director Snyder.
I think we could spend a lot of time hashing out if a pool is necessary, if an auditorium is necessary, how other ways we could spend the money. I think basically what it boils down to for me right now is Central does need a pool. Central does need an auditorium. Those facilities have been inadequate for a number of years. That pool was barely swimmable when I was there a couple of years ago. So I don't necessarily think that's the debate for tonight. For me, what it boils down to is we have a fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers of this community to spend their money wisely. And for me, that's the main focus of what we're talking about right now.
Additional discussion. Director Kluhl.
Well, the board has spent a lot of time talking about this issue for years. This has been on our silo list. The public has vetted it early on. It's certainly changed since that time, but like Director Sherwood, I feel that the public has vetted this. We've vetted it through administration. I think we have what we want, and I really have no desire to go back to that point to review those issues again. I think the public has spoken. I think the board as a whole has spoken. I do appreciate the concerns, though, in terms of trying to be efficient with the use of our funds. I certainly do. Been a number of ways that this issue has been described tonight. Ridiculous, it stinks. I don't know what the right word is, but it's a very unfortunate position that we find ourselves in. We have gone through this process. We should be well on the way at this point, but we're not. I'm concerned. I was thinking, if I had a high school economics class and we had a 21st century skill to learn, we would maybe go through this process and we would work through it, and there might be a mistake. But I think at this point, you know, dealing with the public will and the public good and the taxpayer dollars, it's too late to say, oops, we made a mistake. A $5 million overage on what we projected as our not-to-exceed cost is unacceptable. I think we do have to be stewards of the public money. I'm really surprised that we have no options on the design plan itself. The $1.6 million is gone. I mean, I read paragraph 9.5, the owner may terminate this agreement upon not less than 7 days written notice to the architect for the owner's convenience and without cause. But it seems to me some of the issues in terms of the updates to cost estimate and the $5 million delta from the cost not to exceed are reasonable cause. But our attorney has looked through that and said that no, in fact, it is not. I hope in the future when we do these things we can reword this somehow so that we don't I don't know how standard this language is with the AIA contract, but it just doesn't seem right to me that having spent those funds, we have no rights to the work that has been done. Call it whatever you will. So at this point, I am not comfortable, and I do not have confidence in CSO to move forward with this project. And my vote will be to not approve the continuation. I believe that we can do better beginning again. Again, not going back and starting all over again. I think that we have worked through a process and we don't have to let that go. We've vetted this with the public. We've moved through it. We know what we want. So I don't see this as going back to point zero, but I do not recommend going forward with CSO at this point.
Additional discussion? I was wondering if there's somebody from CSO that you could bring up. I am curious about these cost of work.
Certainly, they have a representative here that.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked that because I've been kind of sitting back. The update of the cost estimates, as you mentioned, were presented and provided to the school district on a regular basis as the contract required. In fact, we reported on those at board meetings. It was always compared to that maximum cost. Where were we? And as we developed those estimates, we built into them initially contingency, design contingency. And really the delta in terms of design development is that contingency continues to shrink as design develops. I think at the committee of the whole, we mentioned that on the day of the bid, we expected this project to bid based on the estimate. We had two big surprises, and one was that we had a bad number for the precast concrete, and the bid market was not nearly as competitive as we expected. Those two things primarily, not entirely, primarily contributed to the overage from the estimate of construction of the work to the actual bids. And so we are obligated, as you mentioned in the one section, to do one of those four options. And if we have to redesign and rebid, it's at our expense. It's not at anybody else's expense. There's no additional cost for that work. So I'm glad you asked that because I really want to make sure we got that clarified. So those were provided to the district.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that because I thought that cost of the work, it must show up 10 times in this document.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, we can't, especially with a project this big, there has to be some sort of a periodic review. And I guess part of it is maybe in the manner that it was expressed. If it was at board meetings, it may have just been up on a PowerPoint or something like that.
It might have been, and more as a summary than a detailed estimate, but those were provided on a regular basis, at the end of each design phase, at the very least.
So is it your understanding too then, this is just a standard document that architects use, right?
Primarily, yes.
Okay. And And do you agree we're at that 6.6 area, that if the owner's budget at the conclusion of, are we at the conclusion of the construction documents phase services?
Yes, and we're at the conclusion, well, in reality, we're at the end of bidding
Right.
services.
Right. But I mean,
Yes.
we are in that area where the owners have to make a decision.
Right, yeah.
And I guess that's all. I just wanted to verify, because I couldn't imagine that we just plumb missed a
Right.
bunch of things that we're
Yeah.
supposed to do. I'm sure that all architects look at all of this, and you must adhere to the time schedules and everything.
Exactly.
So, and I apologize if I misrepresented anything. It's just
I
that.
appreciate you asking the question to come
Okay,
up.
great.
That's great.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You might want to just stay up there. There may be additional
Okay, sure.
questions. Are there any, Director Snyder?
Since architect selection was before my time for this project here, could somebody walk me through the steps that we took to basically select an architect? Were there estimates before we selected the architect? I mean, how did that work?
Mr. Maloney, I don't know if you can take a stab at it. Otherwise, I can say what I think.
Well, there is some record, and many of the participants are still with us and so forth. And the district issued an RFP, received a great many responses, a team of members, this was for architectural services, a team of folks, 4 to 6, I don't recall exactly, vetted those, selected 4 to come forward and make full presentations to that team, and a slightly different evaluation team reviewed or observed the presentations and selected CSO as the recommended firm, and that recommendation went to the board. I've spoken with several of the members of the review committee who characterized it as the ordinary process that the district typically used to retain professional services, of it being transparent, and they felt a good selection process.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Basically, I just wanted to, I didn't think it was budget driven, and I guess that was what I wanted to make sure.
And I think, Mr. Maloney, if you could talk about that part of the process, was there any budget discussion in, or would there be in that part of the selection phase?
Typically, there would be a fee proposal. Ordinarily, the fee proposal would be a percentage of the cost of the work. And my understanding, and John can help with this if I've got it wrong, that originally there was a fee proposal of 8.5% of the cost of the work, and that after CSO was selected, the district negotiated that fee to become 6.5% of the cost of the work, and that became the fee.
So that would have been 6.5% of the 25.364. Okay. That kind of it's a process that is not like our normal process for, say, approving a contractor to perform work. This is a very subjective, I guess, kind of evaluation process, and so the administration does its work to try to figure out who's the best that we can recommend to the board. So it's an imprecise process. Additional discussion. One of, I guess, this is such a big deal. One of the other, as I've thought about it, and the difficulties are that, I mean, this 25 million, in fact, let me ask you, Mr. Maloney, do you think the 25 million, just based on your swags or whatever you use to think about how appropriate estimates are, do you think that, is that a reasonable budget for the kinds of projects that we're talking about there?
Well, without comparing directly to a particular scope or scale, it's a little bit difficult, but to kind of hold your thumb out, it seems like, well, yeah, that's in the ballpark. Now, if you take the 25 that you approved as the estimate in the contract, and there was $1.3 million, $1.5 million that is acknowledged as an error in the concrete estimate, and you're getting pretty close to the 28 million low bid. So we can figure out how the numbers got where they are.
Okay, any additional discussion? I guess we're about ready to vote. And what I would say is that however this vote comes out, I would anticipate that we will be moving forward in whatever direction we go with a sense of urgency, so that we try to the best of our abilities to continue to satisfy the original scopes that were discussed, and to the extent possible try to move along with the originally anticipated timeline. So if there's no more discussion, I'm going to call for the vote. Director Dickman.
No.
Director Snyder.
No.
Director Sherwood.
Yes.
Director DeFow.
No.
Director Crumwitty.
No.
Director Kluel.
No.
My vote is no. The motion fails. Thank you. I think we're done right now. Thanks a lot. May I have a motion regarding approval of construction manager agent for Central High School auditorium natatorium project?
Mr. President?
Director Sherwood.
Oops, I lost it. Get back in a second. Wrong page. Well, I apologize.
That's all right.
No, thanks. Move the approval of the construction manager agent for Central High School as authorized by the administration for the aquarium natatorium project. The administration recommends Russell Construction as construction manager agent for Central High School auditorium natatorium project.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeFow.
Doesn't this become a moot point, given the fact that we did not retain the architect?
I'd like to answer that. Because we did check, again, with our lawyer and our administration. And we can make that decision at any point in the process. It isn't necessary to make it after the selection of an architect. It could be made right now. It could be deferred. Superintendent Tate, did you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
Just that you're correct, and it would be my recommendation for many reasons to wait. And let's just first take care of the selection of the architect and then come back and revisit it again.
Any, Director Dickman?
The statement that was made during open forum earlier was that there would be a cost savings of $66,000. Is that the case, I guess?
Mr. Maloney, would you like to address that?
Yes, the selection process by RFP for the construction manager agent is similar to other professional services where it is a qualitative selection, and the price is only a part of the determination of which firm to recommend. So in that process, similar to selecting an architect, you design a series of criteria that are qualitative, that have to do with the project team, the firm's relevant experience, the price, and all of those things are weighted, but it is not price alone that determines the recommendation.
Director DeFau?
And I understand, the qualification that you've provided. However, given the fact that we as a board limit ourselves in the bid process to the lowest responsive bid, it seems to me that it's contradictory in the process to not apply that same standard. I look forward to having further discussion about that as we move forward. Again, I would suggest that we do not approve a construction manager agent tonight, but rather wait until we have made a decision in regard to the architect.
Okay, thank you. Marcia, you needed to say something?
I just wanted to remind the board that there are other areas where we do not necessarily take the lowest responsive bid when it comes to professional services. And some of those examples would be auditing services and banking services, where the price doesn't necessarily dictate the professional service that you wish to employ, that there are other factors sometimes that are more important, that are more weighted. And so we have had recommendations in the past where we come to the board and it has not necessarily been that lowest responsive bid because it's not been a construction project, but it's been a professional service.
Director DeFau, did you have more? Okay.
I will accept that at face value, but again, this is a capital project.
I understand. Director Sherwood?
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with waiting, but I do have a couple of questions. One of the contentions by the gentleman that sent us this information was that there was a kind of an uneven playing field that was established, that the district had asked for information about people who had backgrounds with problematic projects that were in auditoriums and or auditoriums, and that his contention was that in the industry that you bid only to answer only the questions that are proposed rather than expanding on those answers. And so they did not provide information based on some of the experiences of their personnel because their projects had not been problematic. They had been projects without problems. I wasn't overly impressed with the list that he provided, mostly hotels. I thought the small scale hotel pools that really don't register the kind of pool we're talking about. But anyway, the point is, and I've been trying to get this question answered, is that true that in this industry that people only respond to specific questions and that he's been penalized by doing that rather than being more elaborative as the other guy was?
The short answer, I think, is yes. Ordinarily, you respond to the RFP as it's issued, precisely as it's issued. I've also had several discussions with Mr. Loss, and I agree that our process could be improved, that a more rigorous selection process, a more rigorous criteria would be more helpful. And that would always be the case. We have conferred with the folks that were involved in the process. We all, including Mr. Loss, agree that it was legally sufficient. So that's not a question. Could it be improved to get a better or a different result? Probably.
And you weren't involved in the selection process, I don't think, were you? This is before you came?
It was my first week here. I was involved with it. I participated in interviews and so forth.
So I guess, and this might be a difficult thing because you have to speak for the group, But would that have changed your opinion of the bidders if you had had the information that he says was withheld because of this standard of speaking only to the specific questions?
I can't say. If we had had different language or in the RFP, then other proposers may well also have submitted different materials, and it's just impossible to judge.
Yeah, and we've had the same, not the same situation, but a similar situation when it comes to transportation. That person came before us and said, well, these guys gave you more information than we'd had. If we'd known about it, we would have done this. And my feeling at that time was that was a lack of insight on their part, and that the successful bidder shouldn't be penalized for a lack of insight on the unsuccessful bidder's part. So I'm kind of torn in this particular one, whether or not that's part of what's going on here, or that there in fact is the standard in the industry that you only speak to the specific question, and that the question that was spoken to by the successful bidder fit their scenario as far as experiences, but doesn't really address the experiential base of the employees. Does that make sense?
Yes, and some RFPs, and particularly with some federal agencies, you are prohibited from submitting anything other than precisely what's requested. And so I don't know that we need to be that rigorous, but I think that if we improved our criteria and published it well in advance and gave proposers more time, that there are a number of things that we could do to improve the process. We might still get to a judgment that the lowest price proposal was not the most responsive.
Oh, I appreciate that, and I appreciate what Marcia said, and I agree with what Marcia said. I think this can't always be about price. It has to also be about expertise and quality. So what would happen if we ask you to have this rebid? Does that put us in any kind of legal problematic area?
No, we're not obliged to. It's your discretion to award or not award the recommended contract. And if you said start over with this process, similar to select a new architect, we would go through an RFP process, and we would design it to be as effective as possible and to speak to each of the issues that you all have raised.
Any additional discussion? Director DeFau.
Typically, in your experience, would that occur after the architect had been secured?
It could be either. The purpose of using the CMA delivery method is to retain the contractor as early in the process as possible, and ordinarily you would want the contractor and the designer to start at approximately the same time. You want contractor involvement at the very beginning of the design development work.
Additional discussion? Well, without there being any other motions, I'd like to turn the chair over to the Vice President. I'd like to make a motion to postpone indefinitely this decision.
Can I have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Through an indefinite postponement, are we just not kicking the can down the road and not allowing the operations director to rebid for the CMA?
May I answer?
Yes. Director Johansson.
It's maybe a little bit different than just kicking it down the road. It does kick it down the road, but it allows the board then to make a decision after it makes a decision on what it's going to do with respect to the approval of the architect. And so, and by doing it indefinitely, it doesn't require it to be done at a certain time. The board might decide to go ahead and ask that it be rebid, or it may, for whatever reason, say we want to go ahead and accept the original motion. So rather than telling the administration to rebid it, I figure they've gone through their process at this point, it would give us a couple of more weeks to think about that decision, and I believe the right decision would be to make the approval of the CMA after the selection of the architect.
Director Sherwood?
Yeah, and I had a conversation earlier today about this, and I asked, and I'll ask you, whether or not the having somebody on board, this construction manager on board, would assist in picking another architect. Would that be beneficial? Would that be helpful?
They could assist, and it could be beneficial in that you have the constructability expertise at the table when the new architect proposals come in, that you'd have that perspective on what they were proposing, because that will be one of the concerns, is how do we design to a more economic standard and retain all of the scope. So having the constructability expertise as part of the evaluation panel would be helpful. It would not, it's not necessary. It's done both ways, so it's really a
But
discretionary choice.
Having one more set of eyes and one more bit of experience there can't hurt.
Can't hurt.
Any other discussion? Director Sherwood?
Just, yeah, Mr. President, I'm going to, although I've got a lot of sympathy for what Ralph wants to do, I'm going to vote against this so that I can introduce an amendment to direct the administration to rebid this construction manager position to get him on board to be able to help with this architectural search. I think it might be an important piece.
Any other discussion? Okay. Director Johansson, would you reread your motion?
Sure. I moved that we postpone indefinitely the decision to approve the administration recommendation of Russell Construction as the construction manager agent for the Central High School auditorium/natatorium project.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Director Kluhl.
Just for parliamentary information, Robert's rule says the adoption of postpone indefinitely says it's better not to decide than to decide one way or the other. It kills the motion for the time being, and the motion can't be brought up again in the same meeting. So I think that's effectively what we want to do in this case, just for clarity.
Any other discussion? Director Defoe.
Yeah, I'd like an interpretation of that, because it sounds as if we approve the amendment, then there's no option for further amendment. It just dies with this meeting, with this vote. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. And it's not an amendment that I moved a postpone indefinitely, which would push it at some point in the future, but it could not be reconsidered at this meeting. That's correct.
Other discussion? If not, we're ready to vote. Director Johansson.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Sherwood.
No.
Director Defoe.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
No.
And my vote is yes. So the motion has carried.
Okay, the motion is carried, and this issue has been postponed indefinitely. It's 8 o'clock. Normally, we have about a 4-minute recess after a couple of hours. It looks like we probably have maybe another half hour, 45 minutes, Superintendent Tate?
For me, 20 minutes.
Maybe 20. Why don't we go ahead? It's been a little bit stressful. We'll take a 4-minute recess. And get restarted here. We'll start with discussion items. Superintendent Tate, would you lead us in the budget discussion?
Thank you, Mr. President. Previously, the board has discussed the following budget reduction options: combining school leadership at selected schools, reducing department budgets by 5%, offering an early retirement, changing from block to traditional scheduling at high schools, increasing class size at elementary and intermediate schools, renegotiating superintendent's contract, reducing math coaches, reducing curriculum specialists, and eliminating the district athletic director position. The board decided they wanted to confront options for budget reduction early, and that's what we're doing. Sometime in the fall, we will certainly have longer, protracted discussions and debates and presentations. Tonight, I have two discussions for options. One is reducing the annuity for the 67 administrators from a 9 to an 8% for a savings of $56,000. I checked to see how long this has been going on, and the best of people's recollection is that about 1980, the board began to give annuities probably in place of salary increases, and that went on for a few years, and it reached 9%, and that was where the no additional increases were provided. We do know that several UEN districts offer annuities, and many non-UEN districts offer annuities to their administrators. The other option is one that we bring up perennially, and that's to reduce one associate principal position to a dean or SAM at Central, North, and West high schools. That would be a savings of about $43,000 per position, or about $130,000. So those are the two options that I present tonight. Mr. Scott is certainly in a great position if you want to ask him to talk a little bit about the impact of changing associates to either a dean or a SAM.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Director DeFau.
In regard to the reduction of the annuity option, I'd be curious to know, you've referenced several districts that offer annuities. What is the standard annuity currently being offered by UEN districts across the state? Are we on the high end, the low end? What's the common practice? It seems to me that that may be a viable option. I'm not certain 1% would be sufficient, but I would like to know what other districts are doing. In regard to reducing the associate principal position, I'm wondering if this is something that we can do by attrition as people retire, resign, are moved. That I hate to hit somebody in the pocketbook by $43,000 in a year. That's huge. But if when that position became opened, it was reclassified, we're not going to realize an immediate savings, but yet in the long term would.
And I think that's part of a two-part question. One, is this a good thing to do, and what is the impact? And then secondly, if we think that we can take it, yes, I have thought about attrition would be a way that might take several years, but again, it wouldn't be quite a hit personally on any one person.
I guess I would then be interested in knowing comparatively the impact on the building if you were going to reassign from an associate principal to a dean.
Yes. So my example would be North High School. North High School has a principal and two associates. And if you took away an associate to a dean, they would have a principal, associate, and a dean, which would be very comparable to what Wood Junior High has. And so you would be talking about an evaluator. The two administrators would have to evaluate everybody in the building, so they'd evaluate about 40 to 45 people, staff members, between the two of them. Each one would have, so there's probably 90 to 100 staff members at North. And then from evaluation standpoint, you also have, probably at North, they probably have over 100 IEPs. I think that, I'm just trying to give you numbers of, and then the master scheduler, one of the associates has to be in charge of master schedule, and during that time period, that is not they're not an effective disciplinarian being able to have much time to provide to the normal school day, because they really need to be excluded and focusing on that, because that's a major event that can't be done just after school for weeks at a time. I'm thinking of the other high schools. Each high school, depending on their enrollment, has a little bit different. I think Central has one more administrator, and then West has one more than Central. And so when I first arrived at Central as an assistant principal, we would have had a principal, 2 associates, and 2 deans. And the attrition started there probably 5 or 6 years ago, where we kind of, the deans were kind of the ones that were cut away, slow but sure, and then the discipline fell upon the associate principals. That's kind of a long answer, but
Director DeFau.
Okay, so under our current structure, a dean would have less supervisory or administrative authority than an associate principal.
yeah, they wouldn't be able to do evaluations because they'd be under the teacher contract. I think they're half teacher, half but they can do some supervisor. We've done some freshman games, but again, that stipend is not very large for what the dean's role was. It was really just a workman's way to get your way into administration because the pay was not very good.
Would it be possible to rewrite the job description and reclassify so that it didn't fall within the teacher contract?
That would be probably a few years ago. We had assistant principals, and we had levels. We had a principal, then we had associate and assistant. We'd pay the assistant $15,000. I'm ballparking, but we pay them less than what we pay the associate, and we gain savings there. They'd provide, basically, truthfully, in the building, they provide the same amount of services they would do from an evaluation and events. It was just it was the first step on the administrative leg.
So I take it the question is yes.
We could, they've just given yes. So that's another example to go back to a model that wouldn't be the dean's role, but would be an assistant principal role.
Okay.
Director Sherwood.
Couple of questions. What percentage of the day do you think that associates are tied into disciplinary issues?
I would probably say 85 to 90% of their day is really structured around that.
That would be my experience as well.
Yes.
And we have a committee right now working on discipline. I don't know where that stands, as I guess it stands, but I think we can make some inroads in some of those referrals. I also think that, as far as I know, most of the associates do not have extensive training in things like mediation and other conflict resolution kinds of things. They just kind of have been on the job things, and I think that there's a potential here to reduce the workload for these guys. And I know this sounds like pie in the sky, but I think that's a potential. And a second thing I'm wondering about is the evaluation process. You're right, there would only be 2 evaluators in the building at North. What's the potential for people out of the building to do some of that evaluation? Is that a silly idea? We have evaluators sitting right in this room, for instance, people who are trained evaluators. Is it possible that central administration could pick up a little bit of the evaluation process in some of these buildings?
I would think if we had to reduce, we would have to look at every option because the workload would be not too much, that's the wrong wording, but it would be extreme, the amount of evaluation. So I think we'd have to look at all those options.
Yeah, and I think there might be some potential there as well. But I do think that we can, by looking at the disciplinary issues, that we can reduce the workload in these buildings significantly. At least that's my impression. Thanks.
Additional discussion. Director Dickman.
I had a question about the annuity. Can you explain a little? I guess I'm confused about what type of benefit that is and what impact it would have to reduce it to 8% or even 7% or %.
Well, the impact for each percent is $56,000 over the 67 administrators. It is a percentage of your pay, and it's put into an annuity for you. And so you don't get it, it's put away. I mean, there's things you can do to control it. and essentially it is an extra benefit for administrators. And again, in many districts, and again, not being here when they started it, it's usually in lieu of a salary increase, so that it just doesn't continue with the salary. It's just put in the bank for you, and it's considered a pretty good benefit. I think most people certainly like it.
Director Crumwitty.
Well, that's exactly right. I was here in 1980 when it started, and it was in place of salary increases. And so they instituted the annuity, which if the teachers were getting 4%, for example, we might get 3% plus additional annuity money. So that's that's how it started. So do all excuse me, do all administrators get 9% now? Okay. So if a new administrator came on board, they would automatically receive the 9% annuity. Okay. I don't think it's always been that way, has it, Marcia? With new people coming in? Oh, really? Okay. It is a nice benefit, but I think it was Director DeFaw, someone asked about other urban districts. I'd like to know that myself, because when we started the annuity, in fact, I happened to be the president of the Principals Association at the time. When we started that annuity, we did do that. We went out to all the urban districts and found out who was getting that and what percentage, and that's how we started with the annuity. So I think that would be really good information to have so we can make better decisions. As far as reductions with the principals at the high school, I do have a concern about that. When we're asking our principals to be more instructional leaders, to spend more time in the classrooms, I think it would be very difficult to make reductions in that area. And also with teacher evaluation and other staff evaluation, it's not just teachers, but the number of people that they have to evaluate every year. And we want our principals and associates to be doing a better job with evaluation and spending time in the classrooms. And to do that, we're going to have the people in the building. So I have a concern about that issue and making those reductions.
Any additional discussion? I've got a few things. If I did my math right, Marcia, looks like that comes out, the annuity is about $7,500 per person per year. Is that about right? I just took the 56,000 equaling 1%, multiplied that by 9. I mean, that'd be 500 and some thousand divided by 67. So what we're saying, I think, is that the administrators get their regular contracted amount, plus they get this annuity amount, plus they get the bump in total compensation that we've approved, right? So theoretically, they're getting maybe, if I'm doing my math right, plus they get IPERS. Is that right?
When we figure the package every year for administrators, that annuity is figured in as part of that total package. So when we look at what it cost us for administrators, we not only take their salary, we also take the percent of the annuity, the FICA, the IPERS, the health benefits, add it up all together, so it is always part of that total package.
So we must have a lot more than 67 administrators. There's only 67 administrators that get this annuity?
Correct.
And then how many total administrators are there?
That is, every administrator gets the annuity.
So I guess, yeah, I would have to know a lot more about it, because maybe I'm doing my math wrong. But it just seems like, and maybe if you could give us what that looks like on the whole, but especially, and break it down into pieces so that because and I guess if here we're saying that the annuity amount is 9%, that's way above what we authorized as a total compensation increase.
Correct, but that's only 9% of the salary, and as the bigger picture of the bigger package, it's a very small percentage of, like, if you approve a 3% package increase for administrators, well, the amount of what that annuity would go up because of an administrator's salary increasing is a very small percentage.
Oh, yeah, but I think what I'm saying is that, if I understand the history right, that originally the annuity was given as, or in lieu of a salary increase. But then what happened is, instead of the next year, if we gave a salary increase, we kept the annuity, and we've kept the annuity in addition to. So now, if I understand it right, you get your base pay plus the annuity plus the increase plus the IPERS
Right.
and whatever.
As Ken said, when it started, instead of giving the administrators, say, a 3% increase because that's what the teachers got, they got a 2.5% increase, and the other 0.5 went into an annuity because that saved the district FICA and IPERS on that amount, and that's why it was done at the time.
Right, and I understand it, but I think if we look at least my impression is that if we've increased the annuity to where it's 9%, that's probably not what the original intent was of providing that kind of annuity.
I think if you went back every year if you looked at what the increase when they started it out and grew it to 9%, if you saw those years that the percentage increased, if you add it to what the package percentage of the administrators, you add those two components together, it'd probably come very close to what the package percentage was of the teacher's contract, say, for instance.
Well, anyway, I'd be interested, too, in some sort of historical representation of that. And then the other questions that were asked, I guess, just some comparative information. Is there any other discussion on these two issues? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the board priorities update.
I think it's very important that we continue to discuss and have updates on the approved work plan for your two priorities. And as indicated on the memo, the group that's looking at the school climate has had 2 meetings and done research to where they identified 12 dimensions in a school climate, which is a great foundation to begin to make an analysis. And the next step that they're going to work on at their next meeting is to talk about the issues, challenges, and problems that are embedded in each of those 12 dimensions of the school climate. The committee working on poverty had 1 meeting, and we talked about both internal and external resources, organizations, which we could use to combat poverty, and we found out there's an overwhelming list of these organizations. So some of the things which this committee has to do next, and we're setting up a meeting, is to, number one, come out with some simple list or brochure which can be used internally to help students, parents, and staff realize that we do have great resources and exactly how they may be targeted. An additional step is to form another committee that uses some administrators, principals to review, to work with a policy committee to look and see what policies may need to be reviewed and perhaps changed that will reduce the impact of poverty. And one I'm thinking about is the transfer policy that we have. And then thirdly, we need to actually start thinking about a summit on poverty. So there's a lot going on both of these committees. We're a little bit behind our timeline because we had to go back and relook at the start times again. But again, we're using the work plan. We are continuing to do the things we need to do to keep you moving forward.
Any discussion? Okay, well, we'll keep on moving. Thank you very much. Next is a discussion item adding a 4th board member to the policy committee. Director DeFau, would you express the thinking behind this idea?
Sure, I will, although I thought this was an idea that we discussed and rejected in the policy committee. But I'll go ahead and have no problem discussing it. About a month ago, when I was thinking about the policy committee, which, believe it or not, I do on occasion, I realized that all three of us are up for reelection in the next year. And, you know, I've made no secret of the fact that I am not running again. And it occurred to me that it's really not in the best interest of the district to have three board members comprising the policy committee, all of whom are up for reelection next fall. And so it was my suggestion that we move quickly, as early as the organizational meeting in August, to ask a member of the committee to step aside and to appoint a committee member that is not up for reelection next fall. It seems to me that it's in the best interest of the district, the best interest of the board, to make sure that we're not going to have a vacant policy committee in a year. And knowing that there's a learning curve and there are lots of things that go into being an effective policy committee member, that was kind of where my recommendation was. So we had some conversation, and some of it was, gosh, we all love the policy committee so much. How could we even think of leaving? And so then the question was brought up, could we add a fourth member to the committee? Which we could, but in doing so, then it's an open meeting which requires publication and minutes, and I believe probably requires us to publish minutes, which would be an additional cost if we had to publish minutes in the newspaper, which I assume we would. But it's certainly something that I think warrants the full board's attention and consideration.
Thank you for that. And actually, partly because of that passion that those committee members have for that particular committee, I continued to look at the option of adding a fourth board member. And I talked with Margaret Buckton about this to see what her thoughts were. Of course, she thinks that we should change the legislature's requirements to have 4 years and every other year elections. But since it is where it is, she did say that we could add the fourth member with those representations that Director DeFau was talking about. She thought that it was probably actually a good idea. Not only that we would get somebody else involved, she thought that having an open meeting would maybe be better. So I kind of like the idea of adding the fourth member. It's nothing that we have to do right now, but it is something that was brought to our attention, and the minutes issue is one that I have discussed with Mary quite a bit, and although we would have requirements for them, they would be, we don't have the requirement to do, I forget what we even call it, but it's way more than the minutes. The minutes can be just very simple. We had a committee meeting. If there were decisions, we could talk about those, but we do not have to give the in-depth discussion in the minutes like we do for our own board. And we do that by choice for specific reasons. Anyway, I'd like to hear any of the board's thoughts on the issue of what's happening with that committee. Just thoughts a little bit on whether we kick somebody off, add somebody, whether we add a fourth, or maybe there's a better option. Any discussion? Director Snyder.
When you guys have your meetings on policy, do you have action items? I mean, or is it just something you guys generally, I mean, because action items are one of the things that we have to report in the minute, or in the paper. So if we don't have those, it would be minimal, like a committee of the whole type meeting.
Director DeFau, would you want to kind of describe the way the meetings go?
Oh, I would say in general, there is a schedule for policy review that Mary manages because by board policy, we're required to review our own policies on a 5-year cycle. So Mary has routine policies that she brings to us that are on that cycle. We also will review policies that are brought to us by administrative need. And then we will have conversation on occasion too about whether or not we would like to introduce new policy to the board. There are never action items. I mean, we arrive at a consensus amongst ourselves as to what changes, if any, we're going to bring to the full board for consideration. But there's never any action taken. It wouldn't be possible.
Director Sherwood.
Yeah, I had not thought of this, and I wanted to express my appreciation to Nikki for bringing this up because it's a big deal. I also won't be running for re-election unless the legislature comes through and drops that 4-year thing pretty quick. So the likelihood is pretty small. So there's a potential that there'll be 3 vacancies on this committee. And so we really have to kind of prepare for that by getting some people oriented to this. And I think, Rich, you've been there before, right, Rich, on this thing? But some of the new guys, if they could step up and be part of this. However you do that, I prefer a 4th, but because I do enjoy these things, and I think there's a real dynamic in this committee that I think functions pretty well. We're just enough oppositional to bring in a lot of points of view and usually come to some pretty intelligent resolutions. But if it's required that one of us needs to step down, then I'll step down too to make room for somebody, because I think it's important enough to get that person on there that one way or the other we need to do it. So.
Director DeFau.
And honestly, if we know for certain that 2/3 of us are going to be gone, then it doesn't make sense just to add 1, but I would assume stagger it so that we would have 2 new board members on the policy committee eventually. I don't know if that has, I think we could stage it so that if we made an addition in July, then if we needed to make a transition in December or, at the first of the year or something, so that it just makes sense to me that there are 2 new faces there eventually, sooner than later.
Additional discussion. Director Dickman.
I would like to thank the policy committee not only for all their hard work, but for their foresight that there is a learning curve. I feel like I'm just kind of starting to get over the learning curve of joining the board. So I think I'm ready for another one. So I'd like to volunteer my name for one of the 2 spots. It might be scheduling trouble, but Sadie can come and hopefully not be screaming. But I think that I've enjoyed what I've learned so far, and I think that would be another opportunity to learn some more.
Great, thank you. Any additional, Director Snyder.
I guess I have a question for our existing policy folks. How often are there policy meetings, and when do they hold these things?
Director DeFau.
We meet once a month, and it is typically on a Wednesday afternoon, and we usually begin at 4, though sometimes we begin at 4:30. In terms of length of time, we've been known to go to 6, but I try to be reasonable and try to get out by 5:30. So, hour and a half to 2 hours. There is some work on the front end in terms of reviewing the policies before you come in, and so that we can have an informed discussion. And Mary does a great job of getting that information out in a timely manner. Mary's really good about making sure that anything that would need an administrative review before it comes to us, that's disseminated so we can get the administrative recommendation back before the discussion. So it really is a smooth process, Yeah, we do have those policies like the cell phone policy that tend to linger for a while. But other than that, it's kind of it in a nutshell.
Director Snyder.
I guess I would throw my name in the hat too, because that's a schedule I could make work, as long as it's not like, multiple times a month at, say, 10 a.m. That would conflict with my job that puts food on the table, but I could make that work.
Of course, one of the things that you have to realize is that depending on how this all works out, I could be the chairman of that committee and our meetings might go 3 or 4 hours. But I'm sure we would make sure that doesn't happen. Director Crumwood.
Can you be president and chairperson of the policy committee? Oh, that's scary.
I think Pat was for many years.
Well, first of all, I would like to just thank the policy committee and especially Nikki. I served on the policy committee when I first got elected to the board too, and she has taken really a leadership role in that policy committee, and it's I know she does a lot of hard work. So thank you for everything that you've done. I think it's a great idea. I've said this before, even with the agenda committee. I think we need to start thinking about rotating people. Now that 2 of you have officially made your announcements, I'll make mine. I think it's no secret that I'm not going to be running next year either. So I think we need to be thinking long term about what we're going to do on the board and who's going to play what role and so forth. So, and I want to thank the new people for stepping up, because I think that's great that you're stepping up to the plate, and I think it'll be an exciting time to be on the committee, and I'm sure you're going to learn a lot from these 3 people.
Director Kluhl, I think you've been trying to get in here.
Well, I haven't. It seems kind of anticlimactic for me. I don't have a resignation or a quitting announcement.
Oh, come on.
Not joining that group yet. I think it's fine to have a 4th or potentially a 5th member on the policy committee if there are that many people that really want to be there. I think it's great. I'm thinking too that it would be nice if we could. One of the things that we talk about is gearing people up to be on the board members. I think it would be a great opportunity to get a member of the public on that board too, since it now will be an open committee meeting. I think it would be good. I think it's worth talking about on the policy committee.
Anybody else? Director Crumwoody.
Just a comment. It doesn't concern the policy committee, but it concerns the 4-year term issue. And as a member of the LRC, I have also brought that forward, and we are discussing it. And I would strongly recommend that this board go on record against the 4-year term. So I'll be bringing that forward in the future.
All right, thank you. Superintendent Tate.
Just an observation, when you have 4 board members on a group and they bring something forward, it's done. It is a quorum already, so you've got to be very careful that you're inclusive, that you bring things back for the board first, because again, if they bring it, it's ready. So you need to be cautious.
Good point. Good point.
Okay, thank you. Any Director Sherwood.
And I do appreciate that, but having been on this committee now for quite a while, it's very rare that we ever come to this board with a unified voice. I mean, that's a real rarity. So, but your point is well taken.
Okay, thank you. Any additional discussion? I don't know if it fits in here. I guess it kind of does because I'm on the committee. But my term is up next year as well. So I'm the 4th person who will be up for election. And I have not made a decision yet on what I'm going to do. So I'll just leave it at that. Move on to administrative reports.
None.
It's still light out. Are there any board reports or requests? Yeah, I got that. Director Sherwood, did you have something?
I had a concern I wanted to express. Mike is already, well, he's still here. But in discussion, since we're shifting architects, I have some concerns that maybe some of the materials that were called out on this thing, some of the technical things, sound systems, that sort of thing, may have been beyond the scope of some of our students to be able to be involved in as students. And so as we do this thing again, as we do this process again, and I'm not sure I'm correct in this, by the way, but this is the information I have, I would like to see how we can provide some technical oversight by either district coordinators or personnel to make sure that when we specify a particular technology, that it is the appropriate technology for our kids. That we don't put a college system into a high school if that doesn't make sense for the ability level of our kids. And so, again, I'm not sure that my information is correct, but if it is, that's a concern for me that we provide some kind of ongoing oversight, because these architects may or may not have the expertise to understand what a high school curriculum, arts and theater curriculum might look like. So if we can find a way to build that in, I'd be a lot more comfortable.
And I'll be sending out information shortly, within the next couple of days, about the next steps for the board with respect to all of this. Thank you. Any other reports? I have 2 requests here. First request is from Director Dickman, 62314, information request. How does the district sort students into classes within a grade? Do any schools sort by age? For example, August 15th birthdays through October 31st birthdays, etc. There's research showing that in grades K-3, grouping this way helps to keep struggling students from falling behind. Another request, information request from Director Snyder, 62314. What buildings are holding summer classes? Are school speed limit zones in place for those buildings? And are they enforced by police? I personally witnessed cars traveling at high rates of speed. With numerous children in the area coming from school, we need communications with public and police to ensure safety of our students! Exclamation mark. School speed zones should still be in place to allow for summer programs and summer classes. And I've got a couple of things that I just have to mention. One is, with all of the things that we talked about in the policy committee, I wanted to note here that next year's election is really important, and we do need good candidates for this board. I've been already talking with some people, and I would imagine that others of you have been as well. But really think about board members who can we encourage to consider participating in that. The other thing that I did, and as I thought about it, I thought I made an executive decision that unless somebody's really got any heartache with, I'm going to stick with that. I appointed Director Sherwood to lead an ad hoc committee to look at K-8s. And this was something that we talked about. All of you here know that he's passionate about this as something to look forward to. And the superintendent has been looking at a lot of other issues. So anyway, that's where that's going, just to let you be aware. And if you have any heartache, let me know about it. Is there any other there is no additional board report. There are no additional board reports or requests. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. This meeting is adjourned.